morning, everybody. So this session is the continuation of the previous session regarding the real-time operating system in designing the embedded systems. Fine. So in the previous session, we have seen all the basics about the operating system. What are all the services that are provided by the kernel? And what are the different types of kernels? What are the different types of operating systems? And most of the concepts regarding the process, the different services we have come across. Now, this session, we'll try to narrow down our study towards the process. And later, once we are done with the process concept, we'll still more narrow down to the threads. Okay, so all these concepts of whether it is a task or a process or a thread, you must have already come across in your operating system. But here we'll see some of the examples that are related with the real-time operating system. So real-time operating system is what we are worried about with respect to or in context of the embedded systems. Okay, so first here we will try to see in general, in context of operating system, what is meant by a task, process, and how these threads are created and how they are managed. And later we'll see some of the examples where we take the real-time operating system in particular and see what are all the processes or process states in each of the examples and how exactly the threads are created, managed, what are all the binding techniques, and what are the different types of threads and processes. Okay, to start now, we'll just brush up with the basics of what is meant by a task and a process. A task is nothing but it is a job. Okay, say you can take an example of a teacher giving an assignment to a student. So this is a job or a task given by a teacher to the student. So similarly, a user is going to assign a task or perform a job or a task. So the task is assigned to the operating system and the operating system is going to complete this task. So you have various synonyms for the task, whether it is a job, a process, or a task, all mean the same. So task is also some operation that has to be completed. So it is defined as a program in execution. Okay, a program in execution is called as a process, and interchangeably we will be using three different terms to represent the process. You can also call a process as a task. You can also call a process as a job, because these things has to be assigned and has to be completed. So the formal definition of a process is nothing but a program or a part of a program that is getting executed. A program or a part of a program that is in execution is called as a process. So what are the other terms that are related with the process? Instead of using process, you can also call it as a task or a job. So whether it is a task or a job or a process, all mean the same. They are synonyms. Fine. So now we'll see in detail about what is meant by a task or a process. So here we will see what exactly is a process. Fine. What are the various system resources that a process requires if it has to get completed, and how exactly the execution of a process takes place. As I was mentioning earlier, a process is a program in execution. This program, it may be a process, may be an entire program that is getting executed, or it may be a part of the program that is getting executed. Fine. A process may be the entire program or part of the program that is in execution phase. So such kind of execution phase of the program is called as a process. When it is not getting executed, it is called as a program. But when the program is getting executed by the processor, or it is run by the processor, and when the code is present in the main memory, then it is called as a process. And interchangeably, you have two other terms also that mention the process. It is job and task. The process can also be termed as a job or a task. All mean the same. Fine. So what are the different resources that are required for a process? Because a process is nothing but a program in execution. If a program has to be executed, then what are all the resources, system resources that are required? So the first system resource is the CPU for executing the process. First of all, you should have the processor. You should have the processor that executes the program. So when a program enters the CPU for execution, then it is called as a process. Okay, so that is one of the system requirement or the system resource that is required for the process. Next, when the program has to execute, that is when the process has to be executed, then your code of that process should be present in the main memory. You should have some place for storing these code, or the code in the process should be stored in the main memory when it has to get executed. For that, you need one more system resource, which is memory for storing the code corresponding to the process. Okay, so just code itself does not work, because when we are writing a program, we are defining variables, right? So what are all these variables? They are all called as data variables. They are all called as data variables, and sometimes these variables may be shared also. Okay, so when I say process will have a set of instructions called as the code. Along with this code, we need data that supports the execution of this process. So memory is used for storing the code, that is the program, as well as the data that is required for executing the process. So that becomes the second system resource, or the second requirement for executing the process. Now, the third resource is the IO devices. IO devices. Say suppose the process needs the input to be taken from, if the process is executing, it needs the input to be taken from an input device. Then you need a IO device, right? IO means input output device. If the process is getting executed and it wants to display the output on an peripheral or an output device, then you need an IO device, right? So one of the requirement of the system resources for a process may be IO device also. So these are the main important system resources that are used for a process while it is getting executed. One is CPU, memory for storing the code and the data variables, and the third one is the IO devices, in case if the process needs input from the device and wants to send output to a device. And there are many more resources which we'll be seeing later in these chapters. Okay, and the third point that you have to remember about a process is how exactly the execution of the instructions takes place within a process. A process is nothing but a program. Okay, what does a program have? A program has a set of instructions. Usually, the process execution is sequential in order. That is, one after another. The code gets executed one after another in a sequential fashion. So, this is the basics of a process. So, process is a program in execution. A process is also known as a job or a task. And if a process has to get executed, if a process has to complete its execution, it needs some of the resources. Some of the resources are the CPU for executing the process, main memory or the memory for storing the code and the data variables, and input output devices if a process reads the input from a device and writes the output to another device. And usually the execution of the process is sequential in nature. Okay, so this is about the basics of a process. Next, we will see how exactly the memory is used by a process. A process will have a set of working registers. It has a status register, it has a stack, it has a program counter. So process is a replica. It will try to mimic, or pretend as if it is a processor. What a processor has, a processor will have a set of registers, okay, where some of the registers are called as your general purpose registers or the working registers. The processor will also have a program counter to identify which is the next instruction that has to get executed. And if a processor is using some of the temporary variables, you need a stack for storing those variables. Okay, stack for storing those variables. And status register, any operation that is carried out in the processor is reflected in the status register. So a process usually mimics a processor. Okay, so before entering the processor, the process that is getting executed, that has to be executed, it almost mimics the processor itself. That is, it acts as if it is a processor. Virtually, it is a processor. A process is a virtual processor. Okay, so whatever the processor is having, the same components are also present along with the process. So what are those components? Those components I have already mentioned here in the box that is enclosed within the circle. This entire circle represents the process, and this rectangular box represents the components or the parts of the process. The parts of the process. Since the process mimics or imitates or pretends as if it is a processor, it will have all the components that are present in the processor also. Okay, so you have 4 different components here. Stack for storing the temporary variables, the registers. Okay, registers are used for storing the data. Status register for any operation that is done on the processor should be reflected in the status register. And as usual, your program counter, which keeps the track of which instruction has to be executed next. Okay, so all these things are also present in a process. Now, since the process is having all these things, this process has to be stored somewhere in some memory location. Where is it stored? It is stored in a code memory. It is stored in the code memory. Fine. Where is the data or the program present? The data, whether it is a variable or a shared variable, and the code, the program must be present in the main memory before it is getting executed. Okay, so the program as well as the data variables are stored in a location called as the code memory, and the process itself has got so many entries, and all these entries will be entered in a program process control block. Okay, you must have come across PCB. I have already told in the previous session, PCB will hold the data regarding the processes. Fine. So this process, before entering the processor, it behaves as if it is the processor itself. And that is the reason a process is also called as a virtual processor. So that is the reason you have all the components that are present in the processor are also present in the process. Okay. Next. So this diagram shows the memory organization of a process. The memory organization of a process. So as I was telling, the processor will have various status registers, the general purpose registers, program counter, and the stack for storing the variables and data. Okay, and you have the code memory for storing the instructions or the code of the process. Code memory is used for storing the code of the process. But actually, all the data and code is not stored in a single set of memory, but instead, the memory is divided into various slots or various segments. So if this is the entire memory of a process, if the entire rectangle is a memory of the process, this memory is further being divided into units or segments. This memory is further divided into 3 different segments. Okay, so first segment is called as the stack memory, the second segment is called as the data memory, and the third segment is called as the code memory. Okay, so every process memory organization will look like this. Okay, you have the entire memory for the process, and this entire memory is being divided into 3 different segments or 3 different parts. The first part is always a stack memory. Okay, and the second part is the data memory, and the third part or the third segment is the code memory. And remember always, the in the memory organization of a process, the stack memory should always be present at the highest memory level. Okay, the stack memory should always be present at the highest memory level, and only then your data memory and the code memory. Now coming to the different memory segments over here. As I was mentioning, stack memory is used to store the temporary variables that are used in the process. Stack memory is used to store the temporary variables that are used in the process. And this stack memory has the facility of growing downwards because it is present at the highest level. It cannot grow up. Okay, because this is restricted memory for the process. If it has to grow, it should grow only downwards. It should grow only downwards. Fine. The second segment of the memory for a process is the data memory. So data memory, again, some data is already defined in your program, and this data exists throughout the process. So such kind of data variables are defined and stored in the data memory. Stack is also having a variable. Okay, these variables are temporary variables, but data memory is having variables that are used throughout the process execution, but both of them are somehow storing the data only. Fine. So that is the reason stack grows towards downwards and data memory grows upwards, because both of them are data only. And you have a separate segment for storing the code of the process, the instructions of the process, and this memory is called as the code memory. Fine. So memory is being divided. This is the entire memory organization of a process. This memory is being divided into three different segments. One of the segment is called as the stack memory, which is used for storing the temporary variables. And the second part of the memory is called as the data memory, which is used for storing the data variables that are used in the process of execution. And the third segment of memory is called as the code memory, where the instructions or the code of the process is being stored. Always remember, the stack memory should be present at the highest level compared to that of the data memory and the code memory, and the stack memory grows downwards and the data memory grows upwards. And there is no possibility for the code memory to grow or to reduce, because as soon as the process enters into its execution, the amount of code is already fixed. You are not going to alter the amount of code, so that code fits into the code memory part of the memory organization of a process. So next is process states and state transition. Okay, so when a process, what is exactly this process states and state transition is? When a process is created, okay, it is not directly going to the execution phase. It is not directly going to the execution phase. Instead, the process has to be created first. Then it has to move through various steps. It has to move through various states step by step, and then only it has to go to the execution state. It has to go to the execution state. The process should be created first, and it cannot directly go for execution. Instead, it has to go step by step, that is state by state. It has to move and reach the execution state. Okay, once the process is completed with its execution, then that process has to be terminated. Why? Because you have to give the resources to another process. It is not that at a point of time only a single process is going to execute. You can have multiple processes. Sharing the system resources. So once a process completes its execution, that process has to be terminated. Okay, this movement or this transition movement is called as transition. This transition of the process from one state to another state, starting from the creation till the termination, is called as a process life cycle. Okay, the process life cycle is the transition of the process from the state created till the state terminated, is called as the process life cycle. Which and all stages it is passing through, or which and all states it is passing through, how much of time it is spending in between, and how much of time it is getting to get executed, all these things put together is called as the process life cycle. Okay, and moving of this process from one state to another state is called as the state transition. Okay, so how many states are there generally with the operating system perspective, or with context to the operating system in general? These are some of the states, process states. Okay, these are some of the process states. So create, ready, running, blocked or wait, and completed or terminated. Okay, so these states are with respect to operating system in general, and later we will see two examples where these states are renamed in that particular operating system and what exactly they perform. Okay, so coming to the first state of the process, created state, where the process is being created. The process is just created, an empty process is created, and no resources are allocated. And that such kind of state is called as the create state. Fine. And once the process is created, resources are not allocated. Instead, they are put in a queue. All the processes that are created are put in a queue, and they are made to wait until when? Until sufficient resources are allocated for that process to start its execution. Okay, to start its execution, resources has to be allocated. So until then, where these created processes will be present, they will be present in a queue, and this queue is called as a wait queue. Fine. A process is created, no resources are allocated, and that process is put in a queue which is called as a wait queue. Okay, and when it is waiting in a queue, for resources to be allocated to it, then it is called as a ready state. Okay, ready state, it is ready, all the resources are allocated when it is in the queue. And then, that is, what are the resources? Resources is your CPU, as I was telling earlier. Resources is the CPU or the processor which is required for execution. It needs some of the variables. Some of the variables has to be loaded, and then the program itself or the process itself, its code has to be loaded into the memory. So it needs some resources like memory and CPU for completing its execution. So ready state is when there is inception into the memory, that is, it is going to enter into the memory and it is waiting for the CPU to acquire. It is waiting for acquiring the CPU. This state is called as the ready state. Next, running state. When the process enters the CPU, it has acquired the CPU, it has acquired the processor, and it has started to run, or it has started to execute. Then that state is called as the running state. Okay. The next state is the blocked or wait state. Fine. So when this block or wait, when a process will enter into a block or a wait status, when another process enters which is having a higher priority, and it needs those resources that are acquired by this process, then in such a case, what happens? The currently running process will be blocked, or it will be put into a wait queue again. A wait queue is a different one. A ready queue is a different one. Okay, a wait queue is one where the processes are, those processes that are suspended for temporarily suspended processes are put into a queue which is called as a wait queue, and they are going to wait there until they get the resources it was using. Okay, next, once the waiting process gets its resources, again it will come back to the running state. Complete its execution, and then it is going to terminate. Okay, once it completes its execution, it's going to go to another state which is called as the completed state, and then it is going to terminate its execution or its existence. Fine. So these are all the 5 different states that a process goes through in a process life cycle, and these states are in general or with context to the operating system, and these states are general. But if you see the next slide here, so this slide shows the process states and the process state transition diagram. So this is the state transition diagram. The process is created and it is allocated into the memory. It is given the memory, it can acquire the memory, that is the process is created and incepted into memory. So memory and resources are allocated. When the memory and resources are allocated to the process, then the process is in the ready state. Okay, so once it has got all the resources and it is scheduled for execution, it enters into the running state. The process is running now. And in case if those resources that were acquired by this process is required by some other process, then what happens? It cannot run. If CPU has to be given to some other process meanwhile, okay, then this process cannot run and it moves to the blocked state. Okay, and keeps on waiting here. How long it keeps on waiting? Until those resources are released by another process. Then again it moves to the ready state. And then it goes to the running state. And then after the execution is complete, it moves to the completed state where the process is getting terminated. In case when a process is running and another process with higher priority comes. Okay, when a process is running in the running state and another process P2, say suppose P1 is running and P2 comes into existence, and then it needs some of the resources, not all, but it needs some of the resources. Then what happens? P1 is put into the ready state, and then P2 completes its execution and exits, then only P1 will come into the running state. This is the state transition diagram for a process. So this is the state transition diagram for a process. So now we'll just see two different examples for the real-time operating system. So in the previous session, I have told you what are the different types of operating system. There are basically two different types. One is called as the general purpose operating system and the other is called as the real-time operating system. So general purpose operating system is one that is basically used in your desktops and laptops, and real-time operating system is one that is used in most of the embedded system applications, which is used in most of the embedded system applications. So examples we have come across, I've given some examples. You must have not come across those, but still these are two examples for the real-time operating system. VxWorks kernel and MicroC or OS2 kernel are two different kernels with respect to VxWorks RTOS and MicroC or OS2 RTOS. So these are two kernels of two different real-time operating systems that are used in embedded system applications. Okay, so how you have all these 5 different states of the process, that is created, ready, running, blocked and completed. In the same way, you have different states even in this kernel, but the names of these states are different. So the VxWorks kernel has got one or more combination of the states. Those 5 states are present individually, or some of them are combined into a single state, and there are 4 different states in a VxWorks kernel operating system. Kernel is the core of the operating system. So this kernel has got 4 different states. One is the ready state, pend state, pend is for pending or waiting or blocked state, delay state and suspend. Okay, so as we have seen with the operating system perspective, ready is when the process enters or when the process can acquire the memory as well as the resources, the CPU, then it is called as a ready state. Then the process enters the ready state. When a process can acquire the memory and it can enter or acquire the CPU, then the process is said to be in ready state. Okay, same over here also. When the process in VxWorks kernel can acquire the memory as well as the CPU, then that process is said to be in the ready state. It is said to be in the ready state. Now, once it is in the ready state, it can move directly to the running state. Running state is also combined with the ready state only. But in between, you have 3 more states. One is called as the pending state. So in general, in operating system, you call it as blocked or waiting. Blocked or waiting. Fine. So here in VxWorks kernel, instead of using blocked or waiting, you are using the term called as pending. PEND stands for pending. Pending is it's still waiting, right? Still waiting. It has not come to a conclusion or it's not come to completion. So this state is called as the pending state and usually represented as PEND. Okay, and delay state. One more state is added over here in the VxWorks kernel, that is the operating system of VxWorks, that is the delay state. Delay state is sleeping state. It is idle. The state is called as delay, which means the process is idle when it enters into this state. When a process is idle, then it enters into a delay state. It is also called as a sleeping process. Okay. And the last state is the suspend state. Suspend state is when the process has to be stopped, temporarily suspended from execution. Okay. When the process has to be temporarily suspended from execution, then the process enters into the suspend state. It enters into the suspend state. What is the reason for temporarily suspending the process from execution? Maybe because of the lack of the resources. Okay, because of the lack of the resources, the process may have to be suspended in between. Okay, and that is the reason the process is suspended. And when the process gets suspended intermittently, then it enters into a state called as the suspend state. Okay, so the VxWorks operating system in particular has got 4 different states for a process: ready, pending, pend, delay, and suspend. So ready, when the process acquires the CPU, acquires all the resources for execution, then it is called as ready and gets into the execution and the completion states. Okay, then you have 3 more states which are in particular to VxWorks operating system. One is called as the pend, which represents pending, in the sense if a process is waiting for something, it enters into the pend state. If the process is sleeping or idle, then it enters into a delay state. And if the process is suspended temporarily, it is removed, it is not available for execution, then it enters into a state called as the suspend state. Fine. So this is one of the example of the real-time operating system which is used for embedded system applications. Okay. The second example is the micro C or OS2 operating system kernel. Okay. So this kernel also makes use of 5 different process states. One is called as the dormant, ready, running, waiting, and interrupted. Okay. So dormant is created. How you have created state in your operating system, the same fashion you have dormant state. So when the process is created, the resources are not allocated to the process. Then what is it? It is dormant. It has been created, not in action. It is waiting. It is idle, right? So that state, when the process is created and waiting to get it, acquire all the resources and get into execution, that state is called as the dormant state. It is not in action. It is just idle. Fine. So once it acquires all the resources, then it moves to the ready state. From the dormant state, moves to the ready state. In ready state, the memory for storing the code of the process is acquired and then moves to the running state. In the running state, it executes the process, and in case because of the lack of resources, or if the process is using some of the shared resources, and in case if there is preemption or something, then the process goes into the waiting state. And temporarily suspending, you have seen the temporarily suspended processes enter into a suspend state in VxWorks operating system. Similarly, here temporarily suspended, it is still available for execution, but temporarily suspended and waiting is same. Interrupted or waiting is same. It enters into a state called as either waiting or the interrupted state. Okay. So once the resources are available, then the process moves into the running state, runs to its completion, and exits or terminates itself. So this was in general these states where in general with respect to the operating system. Generally you make use of these terms, but coming to the narrowing our topic to the real-time operating system and examples of real-time operating system, in VxWorks operating system, these are all the process states. And in micro C operating system, these are all the different states. Maybe they perform the same operation as that of the general operating system terminologies, but only thing, the names given to each and every state is different. Fine. The last topic of the process is the process management. So process is a program in execution. So what are all the services taken care, or what are all the works taken care by the process management unit? You have the process management unit. So what are all the works taken care or services taken care by the process management unit? So process management deals with creation of a process. So if the process does not exist, creation of the process is also taken care by the process management, and setting up of the memory space. This is one of the resource, because the code has to be moved to the process memory organization. You have seen the memory organization where the memory is divided into stack memory, code memory, and data memory. The code as well as the data has to be moved into these particular memory locations. That is one of the process that is taken care by the process management. And third, loading the processes code. Memory is set up, and the third operation is moving the process code along with the data is the third operation that is taken care by the process management. And once it is loaded, the process is ready to get executed. The memory is allocated. What's the next resource? Maybe if it needs some of the shared resources like shared data variables, it should acquire those data variables. And then very main thing is it should acquire the CPU. It should acquire the CPU. So allocating of these system resources like the CPU, the memory, and the shared resources like shared variables. Okay, all these things are also the are also the job of a process management unit. And the next job that should be taken care is setting up of a process control block. So process control block is a memory location where you'll be storing all the details of the process, in which state, what is the status of the process, what is the ID of that process. Every process that is created will be allocated with an ID, what state it is, what type of operating system it is using, whether it is using a hard real-time operating system or a soft real-time operating system, because we are concentrating on the real-time operating systems for embedded systems. Okay, so whether it is hard real-time or soft real-time, so such kind of type of operating system, and all the states where exactly it is present, whether the process is terminated or still it is running, or it is suspended temporarily, or it is deleted. Okay, all these data is present in the process control block. Okay, so these are all the various functions that has to be done during the process management, right from creating the process, setting up the memory, loading the process into the process code, that is the memory organization of your process, allocating all the system resources like the shared variables, the processor or your CPU, and then setting up the process control block, and then terminating the process. All these are the operations that are carried by the process management. Okay. So the next important topic is the threads. So far we have seen about the process, and now we'll see what exactly is a thread, and then move on to what are the states of a thread, and what are the different types of threads, and how exactly a thread is created, and finally we'll try to end with the difference between a thread and a process. Okay, so coming to the definition of a thread. So you must have already come across the definition of a thread as a lightweight process. Definition of a thread as a lightweight process. What exactly is this lightweight process, or what is a thread? So according to the formal definition, it says a thread is a primitive that can execute code. So what is the general meaning of a primitive? A primitive is nothing but a function or a set of instructions. A primitive is called as a function. A primitive is called as a function or a set of instruction that can execute code. Usually primitive, you call it as a built-in function or a library function. Okay, a thread is a single sequential flow of control with a process. You can assume that a process is existing and a unit of a process is called as a thread. A single unit of a process is called as a thread. That is, a process can have multiple threads, but a thread is itself. A thread is itself. It is a single unit of execution of the process. Okay, but a process is a set of threads put together. A group of threads or a collection of threads put together is called as a process, but a thread is a single unit of process execution. Okay, now coming to different threads which are part of a process share the same address space. Now we have seen the memory organization of a process. Now we will see the memory organization of a thread. Okay, so as I said, thread is a lightweight process. It is a single unit in a process. It is a single sequential flow of control within a process. Okay, so a thread is closely related to a process. So we have to see how exactly the memory organization is present in a thread also. So if you go back to your process, memory organization of a process, the memory is being divided into three different slots or three different segments. One is the stack memory, data memory, and the code memory. Okay, so stack memory is used for storing the, I said, temporary variables. Okay, and data memory for storing the data that is related with the process, and code memory for storing the code of the process or code of the program. In the same way, even here, the thread is having a memory organization, and this memory organization also has the stack memory, data memory, and code memory. Okay, but if you have multiple threads, in a single process, then the stack memory is not shared by all the threads. The stack memory is not shared by all the threads. If you have n number of threads, there will be n number of stack memories, and the program counters and the status registers. Okay, only the code memory and the data memory are shared among different threads. Okay, only the data memory and code memory is one. You have only one data memory and one code memory for a process, and there are n number of threads, and all these n number of threads will share this data memory and the code memory, but they are not going to share the stack memory. Each thread will have its own individual stack memory, because each stack memory will have, each stack will have the thread status. If you see this point here, thread maintain their own thread status, program counter. Okay, so stack memory is different, thread status registers are different, and PC program counter is also going to be different for each and every thread. But all threads are going to share the same data memory and the code memory. Why this status register, program counter, and stack has to be different for each and every thread? Because one thread may be in a different state, and the other thread may be in a different state of execution. Because we have already seen what are the different states of the process. In the similar way, you have different states for a thread also. One thread may be created just now, but the other thread might also be executed, would also have completed its execution. So since the status is different for different threads, one thread is still at the beginning, the other thread has already completed its execution, right? So for that reason, you cannot make use of the same status register for all the threads. You cannot make use of the same program counter, and you cannot make use of the same stack for all the threads. That is the reason you are having multiple stacks for multiple threads, but only the data memory and code memory is same. So this is nothing but multi-threading concept. If you have a single thread, you will have only a single data memory, single code memory, and a single stack memory, and all other various components like a status register and a single program counter. But when we are using multiple threads, that is multi-threading, you have multiple threads, then you will have only a single data memory and a single code memory, but you'll have multiple stacks, multiple status registers, and multiple program counters to keep track of each and every thread that is running at the same point of time, which is the concept of multi-threading. Okay, so here we can see the memory model of, or memory organization of a process along with its threads. When threads are there, when threads are present, how exactly the memory organization looks like. Okay, so if you compare this model or this memory organization with the earlier one, you have a code memory, you have a data memory, you had a single stack memory, whereas here if you see this memory organization, you still have a single code memory, you still have a single data memory, but if you have two threads, there are two different stack memories. Okay, so stack memory for the entire process is this, but internally this stack memory is being divided into slots or divided into segments for each and every thread. So this is the difference between the memory organization of a process and the memory organization of a thread. Okay, hope it is clear now. Now, the difference between the memory organization of a process and a thread. Okay, when this kind of memory organization comes into picture, whenever there is a concept of multi-threading. Multi-threading is whenever you have multiple threads within a single process. Okay, a process is there when you have multiple threads within a single process, then this kind of memory organization will come into picture. Okay, so as I was already speaking, multi-threading concept. Okay, when you have multiple threads within a single process, then it is called as a multi-threading. So here I have highlighted what are the advantages of using a multi-threading concept. Okay, what are the advantages of using a multi-threading concept? Multi-threading concept is always advantageous because a single process has got multiple threads. A single process has got a multiple threads. That is, say suppose you have a single program. A program in execution is usually called as a process. Fine. The entire program is there. Maybe this process is divided into multiple threads in the sense some instructions into a single thread and some instructions into the thread 2 and some more instructions into a thread 3. Now you are dividing the entire process into 3 different threads and assigning it to execute, and you are assigning it to the processor. Now what happens? Say suppose thread T1 does not need the IO. It needs the IO, input output device. Okay, thread 1 needs the IO and thread 2 does not need the input output device. Okay, so when thread 1 has to execute, it should receive the data from where? It should receive the data from the input device. In case if the input device is not ready, then what happens? Thread 1 has to wait. How long? Until the input device is going to be ready. Only once the input device is ready, then the process or then that thread can receive the data. Then that thread can receive the data. Okay. Fine. I was telling that the entire process has got 3 threads: T1 thread 1, T2 thread 2, and T3 thread 3. Okay, thread 1 needs the input device to accept the input, and thread 2 does not need an input device. Data is already present. Okay, if T1 has to execute, the input device associated with T1 has to send the data to T1. When it has to send, it has to wait until the input device is getting ready. So once this thread 1 is waiting, the CPU is idle. Instead of that, what can happen is the thread 2 can be assigned to the CPU and execution can begin. When thread 1 is ready to execute, it has received the data from the input device, then thread 1 can be assigned with the CPU. So when we are splitting the process into different threads and assigning the CPU, then most of the time is not wasted. Otherwise, if you take the entire process itself, because initially itself there is wastage of time because it is waiting for the data to enter from the input device. So sequentially what happens? There is a delay occurring for all the instructions in the process. The entire process gets delayed. So to overcome this disadvantage, you are making use of the concept of multi-threading. So in multi-threading, the process is divided into different threads and each thread is interleaved. Each thread's execution is interleaved. If one thread is still waiting, the other thread can go into execution, complete its execution meanwhile, and then the other thread can continue its execution. So CPU utilization is becoming more efficient. CPU utilization takes place and hence faster results are brought. Okay, you can get results very fast when you are using the concept of multi-threading. So this is the organization or the concept of the multi-threading. So here you have a single code memory, you have a single data memory, but you have multiple stack memories and multiple registers for each and every thread. So in this diagram, you can see there are basically 3 different threads where thread 1 is the parent thread and which is forking or which is creating 2 different threads, thread 2 and thread 3. Simultaneously, all the 3 threads are going to execute. Okay, so this diagram depicts the concept of multi-threading. One thread is forking, or forking is nothing but creating. It is creating 2 other child threads and simultaneously, parallelly, these 3 threads are going to run using the code memory and the data memory. But remember, the stack and the registers are going to be different and unique for each and every threads because they have to update their own status in the status registers. Okay. So coming to the different thread standards. So each and every operating system will have their own thread standards. So it clearly says thread standards deal with the different standards available for thread creation and management. different operating systems or different platforms employ their own methods for creating a thread and for managing a thread. That is, management in the sense starts from creation, execution, and termination, allocating the resources. All these things put together is called as management of thread. Okay, so what are these three different libraries, or what are the three different standards? Is one is called as the POSIX threads. Usually the Unix platform makes use of the POSIX APIs or the POSIX threads. Fine. And Windows operating systems makes use of the Win32 threads. And the most familiar one that you have already come across in your OOC or Java subject is your Java threads. Now we'll see what exactly and how exactly these threads are created and how they are managed. Coming to the POSIX threads. I said POSIX is with respect to the Unix operating system. Okay, and POSIX stands for Portable Operating System Interface. POSIX stands for Portable Operating System Interface, and this POSIX standard library for thread creation and management is called as the pthreads. Pthreads is a library which is used in POSIX to create the thread and manage the thread in C language. Okay, it is in C language. The POSIX standards has got a library which is called as the pthreads that is used for thread creation and management. And usually this management functions and creation functions are present in the C language. They are present in the C language. And what are those primitives? I said primitive is nothing but a function. Primitive is nothing but a function or a statement that is used. Okay, so you have two different examples over here with respect to the POSIX, that is Portable Operating System Interface, to create a thread and to make a thread wait. To make a thread wait, you have two different primitives or functions here. This is a library function int pthread underscore create. This is a function which is used to create a thread in POSIX. This is a primitive that is used to create a thread in POSIX, and it takes three different parameters. It takes three different parameters: pthread underscore t new thread. So this is a parameter, or this is a handle which is going to create the, this is a handle which is going to create a new thread. Fine. And then you have the attributes. What are the different attributes that should be present in a process control block or a thread control block? So the second argument or the second parameter says what are all the different attributes that has to be present when the thread is being created. And the start function along with the argument. And the start function along with the argument, which is used to make the thread ready or make the thread to be moved to the running state. Okay, so this parameter is used to make the thread ready with all the system resources and to be moved to the running state. So these are all the three parameters that are used while creating the thread in the POSIX environment. Okay, so POSIX is usually having all the library functions in C language only. So you have one more primitive with respect to POSIX threads, which is int pthread join. Okay, join is if you want to stop a currently in case blocks the current thread and waits until the completion of the thread pointed by it. That is, if you want to preempt a thread, that is, one thread is running and you want to stop that running, make it wait and assign the processor to some other thread. Okay, so then you are going to use a pthread join. You are invoking another thread, or you are forking or creating another thread. For creating another thread and giving execution to that thread, you are using the primitive pthread underscore join. So first parameter is the new thread that has been created, and thread status, which gives the status of the existing thread. Okay, why you need the status of the existing thread? Just because once the new thread is done, you have to continue with the thread that was waiting, that was blocked. Okay, so these are the two different primitives that are used in POSIX to handle the threads. You have many more, but these are the two examples that are being considered for your syllabus. You can just go through other primitives. You can Google out for other primitives that are used for creating and managing the threads. So the second type of thread, this is a program which is used in POSIX. Okay, POSIX. Making use of the POSIX, you are trying to create a thread and you are going to print the message, hello, I am a new thread 5 times. Okay, and 5 times, hello, I am in main thread. Fine. So 5 times it has to print, hello, I am in new thread, and 5 times it's going to print, hello, I am in main thread. So this program is written using the POSIX primitives. It is written using the POSIX primitives. So as I was telling, pthread underscore create is a primitive or a library function which is used to here in the main function. Execution starts from the main function. So you are using a primitive pthread underscore create to create a new thread. Okay, so here you have the handle and all the 4 parameters are given here. So those parameters are already given as part of the primitive definition over there. So this function or this primitive is used to create a thread. Create a thread. Okay, if it is not created, if these two fields are going to be null, no arguments or no parameters are there, then it is null. If it is null, then the thread is not created and you're returning 1. Usually in POSIX, the return value is usually a integer value. It usually returns an integer value. Okay, so if the thread is not created, you are exiting, you're printing a message and exiting. Otherwise, if the thread is successfully created, you are doing the job. What job are you doing? You're trying to print, hello, I'm in main thread. Okay, hello, I'm in main thread. Fine. So first time it enters. How many times this loop has to run? This loop has to run 5 times. That is 5 times this message has to be printed. So first time the printing is taking place. For the first iteration, the printing takes place. Hello, I'm in main thread. After printing this message, what is happening? You are using a for loop. And if you can see, this for loop is just a delay. You are creating a delay. So immediately after printing this message, after executing this statement, you are generating a delay. Fine. So when this delay is happening, what you are doing is another thread is created in the program itself. If pthread join, if pthread underscore join is null, if the second parameter is null, if the status is null, you say that error in thread join. Thread join is a primitive which is used to create a new thread. Pthread underscore join. Join is used to create a child thread. Fine. So once this is executed successfully, what happens is it comes to this part. It comes to this function. What is this function? Denotes the child thread or the child thread or a new thread that has been created. So since the main function has got a delay here, since the main function has got a delay here, the new thread is being created, and meanwhile, until that delay is overcome, it prints the message, hello, I'm a new thread. Okay, this message also has to be printed 5 times. But since there is a delay in the main function, first time, for the first iteration, it prints, I am in main thread, generates a delay. To overcome this delay, it goes to the new thread that was created. Okay, so in the new thread, it is going to execute this printf statement. Hello, I am in new thread. And again, a delay is given. Again, a delay is given. So between this delay, what happens? It goes to the main function again. The second iteration works. By that time, this delay would have been completed. It prints, hello, I am in main thread. So the messages, hello, I am in main thread and hello, I am in new thread are printed alternatively 5 times. Alternatively 5 times. First, it will print, hello, I am in main thread. Next, it will print, hello, I am in new thread. Then again, it will print, hello, I am in main thread. Then hello, I'm in new thread 5 times and then the program terminates. Okay. So if you see the output of this program, you can see that the messages are printed alternatively, and then there you are using the CPU utilization efficiently. So that was one of the advantages of your multi-threading concept, where efficient CPU utilization is taking place. Fine. So the CPU is not kept idle. Instead, the other threads that were forked or created are using the CPU when one of the thread becomes idle. Okay. So next type of thread standard is called as the Win32 threads. Okay. Win32 threads are basically used for the Windows operating system. Windows operating systems, make use of Win32 threads, and usually they are called as Win32 API libraries. So Win32 API libraries will coordinate in the creation of the thread and management of the threads. There are many primitives in Windows. You can Win32 API libraries, you can just go through those primitives. And the third type of threads is the thread standard is the Java threads, which you have already come across, in your Java, where thread is a class. Thread is a built-in class which is defined under java.lang. Okay, you can inherit all the properties. You can inherit this thread properties to a new class called as the mythread. Okay, because this states that, right? So what a thread class can perform, the same operations can be performed by a mythread. You have already come across this, so I'll just brief it out. What is the meaning of start and what's the meaning of run? Okay, so for running a thread or executing a thread, you are using the function run, and start is going to make the thread ready. And since you have created a new class called as mythread, you are passing a start function as part of the object, and then you are overriding the run function. You are overriding the run method. So run method has got nothing to do, but you are overriding it and you are giving the functionality to the run method. So what is going to happen when a run method is executed? It's going to just print hello from my thread. The message hello from my thread is printed. This is how you create a thread and execute a thread in the Java threads. I'm not going in depth with the Java threads because you must have already come across in Java and OOC. Okay. So next we'll just see thread preemption and then stop. The remaining concepts we'll see in the next class. So what is preemption? Preemption is the currently running thread is stopped or blocked, and another thread is allocated with the resources. This is called as the preemption. Thread preemption is an act of preempting the currently running thread. Preempting the currently running thread is stopping the currently running thread and then giving the resources to a new thread and making that thread to run is called as preemption. If you cannot give the resources to another thread and stop the currently running thread, it is called as non-preemption or non-preemptive execution. But here you are stopping the currently execution and giving the control to another thread for completing the execution. Okay, this is the thread preemption. Can be done among kernel threads. You cannot do it among user threads. These concepts we'll see in the next class. And when you are moving from one thread to another thread, that operation is called as thread context switching. Usually you would have come across process context switching. So when you switch between one thread and another thread, you call it as an operation, you call it as a thread context switching. Okay, so preemption of threads can happen and it is called as thread preemption, and moving from one thread to another thread is called as thread context switching. So I will stop here. Threads and thread binding and the remaining syllabus I will continue in the next class.